All right, so let's see. Everybody has questioning rubric, I2 by Langston Hughes with your annotations, with last night's discussion questions, and writing utensils, correct? Excellent. Okay, so then let's get started. Good morning. How is everybody this morning?
Tired.
Tired, good, little combination. I know, first period's hard. Still waking up. The good news is that you only have 2 days to the weekend. Yay. Just so that we kind of touch base and remember what it is that we're working on, we started Unit 3 this week. Our essential question for Unit 3 is, how does an author's presentation of information affect one's understanding of history? We've started just a teeny tiny bit to work toward answering that question by analyzing I Hear America Singing by Walt Whitman. So you've reread the poem, you've listened to a dramatic reading of the poem, you've made annotations, you've analyzed discussion questions about it, you've written questions about it, you've answered questions about it. So hopefully at this point you have a very thorough understanding of not only Walt Whitman's message, but the devices he uses to convey that message. Our focus today will continue to work on questioning. Yesterday you analyzed some questions that I wrote about I Hear America Singing that you then were able to use for discussion. Today we really want to get you doing some of the questioning and using that for discussion. So our objectives for today, these are for you, so they start at I will. Do I have a volunteer, somebody who can see this? Can somebody read the first objective aloud and everybody else can follow along in their heads? Christiana, can you see that?
I will use annotations to develop critical questions in order to analyze an author's message, perspective, and purpose.
Excellent. So that's the first thing that we're going to work on. And then the second part, can somebody read I will, and then the second part of our objectives for today? Kristen, you're nice and close. You can see that.
I will collaborate with peers effectively and respectfully to revise questions and analyze text for deeper understanding.
Excellent. So we're really going to go through a process, make sure that our questions are really interesting, critical questions that have the attributes we've been talking about, and then we're going to use those to have discussion to deepen our understanding of I2 so that we can eventually, this is block 4, we'll come back together and we'll look at Walt Whitman's perspective on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Langston Hughes' perspective on that and his message, and we'll start to look at both of those pieces and how we can put them together to start to think about the essential question. Okay, so everybody should have writing utensils, Langston Hughes' annotated poem with your discussion questions on your desk, and the questioning rubric. Before we get into our first task, I'd like you to turn to the person next to you, and Connor, you're going to have to help David out since he's been out. There are a couple of things we've been talking about. I want you to discuss, A, why do we ask questions of text or either of what we're reading, what we're listening to, what we're viewing or seeing? Why do we ask questions? What is one way we could go about asking questions? What's a process for asking questions of text or what we're seeing or listening to? And what are some of the critical attributes of really good questions? So what do good questions look like? Why do we ask them? And what's at least one way we can go about asking questions or forming questions for ourselves? Talk about it with the person sitting next to you and be ready to report what your partner says. Okay, so you can discuss all 3 of those questions now and be ready to report out what your partner said. You can work as a group if that's easier, or if you just want to talk partner to partner this way, you can each just only have to listen to and report back on one person. It might be easier to manage.
We ask questions, so we look deeper into something. We have to be present so that we don't just
We ask questions because so we can understand stuff.
We have to questions. She's having questions. What's other questions? Like, why do we ask questions? For like that?
So we need to come up with, why are you looking at me like that? Or What we supposed to be discussing? We're supposed to be talking about questions and how
Formulating questions.
and how formulating questions will
You feel like you can report out
Help
on what
better
your
your
partner said?
understanding on whatever you're doing.
Yeah, when I get the first day where I'm gonna put like
Like, what is it made out of? You made it.
That's a good question. Yes, where your question is about questioning.
with a higher order
What are the critical
question, you have
attributes
to
of
think,
interesting discussion
and so it
questions or
basically
critical questions?
makes you go back to the story and look
Why
at
do we ask
details that
interesting
you don't
critical
normally
discussion
see.
questions? And what's one way to go about
That
asking questions of
If
text?
a question is going to make you think and see
What,
it.
why, and how?
You can start with why.
Like if you know something, that's how do you do that? What is that?
Let's take 1 more minute to wrap up what we're talking about, either with your partner, your pair, or within your group, which some of you chose to do. Why do we ask questions? How do we question? And what are the critical attributes of good questions? So I'm going to come back to you in 1 minute and start to call on tables to report.
The questions.
Well, when you're asking a question, you have to decide if you want it to be like an open-ended or a yes or no answer.
Well, it'll probably be open-ended.
Well, depending on what your question is, like, isn't it good here? The judge starts from his skin tongue?
You have to relate back to the text here. I think it means in his skin tone, and it shows I too am America.
And also, for this, when it says I'm a dark brother, what I think about is is he like
I think he's just a different race. Like that.
Because I think you're absolutely right.
And then I took this whole thing, I interpreted it as like, it's part of the time, it's before Martin Luther King Jr. Stopped discrimination.
Okay, let's come back together. All right, so let's start. Actually, we'll go in reverse of the order I gave you the questions. Let's start with the what first. What are the critical attributes of really good, thoughtful discussion questions? Things that either you can think about further in your head or that you could discuss with other people. And it's not cheating if you chose to use the rubric. You're using resources. What are those 3 critical attributes we've been discussing? Kristen, what did Aisha say?
She said what was on the rubric, so text-specific, higher order, and open-ended.
Okay, and we have clarifications of what those attributes are on the rubric. We've talked about them, you looked at them and discussed them yesterday. Good, so they're higher order, open-ended, and text-specific. And again, we can take those text-specific questions, open them up to other ideas as long as we bring them back to the text. Good. What is one way to go about asking good questions, thoughtful questions? Again, we all kind of have our different strategies or ways to do something, but yesterday I showed you my way of thinking through how I come up with questions. You may have a different process. Somebody want to volunteer something that was said at your table by either one of your group mates or your partner? Grant.
by asking what or how questions?
Okay, so, and what, when you ask what or how questions, what are you looking for in the text to ask what or how about?
Well,
It's a crazy question.
you're kind of asking not for like yes or no. You're kind of asking them to go deeper
About, go deeper about what?
into the text about why they're right or why they're wrong.
Why what is right and what is wrong?
The answer.
What is, describe their answer in another way. If you're reading the text and giving an answer, that is your what about the text?
Opinion.
Could be your opinion, could be your interpretation, it could be your analysis, absolutely. So you want to ask why or how, what about the text? What does it say in the text that makes you think this? Okay, why do you think this based on the text? Good. What are other how or why questions that we might ask of a text in general? We would want it to be specific to a particular text, but in general, what types of questions might we ask? How, blah, blah, blah. Why, blah, blah, blah. And if you want to, you can go back and look at the model questions for I Hear America Singing to help you with that. if you reread those questions, go back to get this for you. If you reread those questions, those how questions, why questions, what were they about? Rachel?
How different pieces of author's craft and different things in the story affect the story and how we perceive it or see it.
You said so many key words right there. So we're talking about author's craft, literary devices. Why does the author use what he or she does to get across? And then another word that Rachel just said was perspective. How does it affect, how do the words that the author uses affect our perspective? How does the author's perspective affect what is written? You said something about message. How is the author's message conveyed? What is the author's message? Why is the author giving us this message? All coming back to, we talked yesterday morning about the fact that in order to really answer this big question, with each of the pieces of text that we look at over the course of the unit, we really need to look at what is the author's message or theme or central idea, his or her perspective, what is it about his or her context or life that affects the point of view or the tone we see in the writing, and then the purpose. Why did this person write this piece to begin with? Why this poem? Why this narrative? Why this biography? So looking at all of these and how the literary elements that the author uses contribute to that, those are all types of things we can look for in our how and why questions. And speaking of why questions, why ask questions? Why ask why? Aman, what did somebody at your table say?
Grant said something like you'll get a better understanding and it may change your interpretation of things.
Excellent. And that's something, and that second part is interesting too. As I walked around to all the different groups, it will help your understanding, deepen your understanding, make stronger your understanding. Those were all things that I heard. Similar language that is connected to that. I heard people saying that it will clarify, or if something's confusing, it'll help you understand. And then, Aman, could you just repeat the second part of what you said?
It'll also change your interpretation.
And it may change your interpretation. It may change your viewpoint on something. And so, or you may think something originally when you read a text, go back, reread it, and then you say, actually, no, now I kind of think something else after questioning it and thinking it through. Great. Other possibilities for why we ask good questions. Kristen?
Make you think more, go deeper into your brain.
Deeper into your brain. I love it. I'm going in. Somebody call me back out. Good. If you're going deeper into your brain based on something somebody else has written, you're probably looking at bigger life concepts, ideas, maybe what you believe based on the text or what you understand based on the text. Excellent. Because somebody else wrote it doesn't make it true. No. Okay, thank you. Just because somebody else wrote it doesn't necessarily make it true. So what is another reason I should question text?
Because they could be lying.
Maybe they're lying, maliciously, possibly, and even if not maliciously, with evil intent. Malcolm?
To get like the full story of whatever you're doing.
Okay. Do you remember yesterday, Christiana told us that during the snow day, she and her brother had a snowball fight. I asked her who won. She said that she did. And I said, I wonder if her brother would tell us the same story. Sometimes we have to ask questions of although I'm sure you won. There's no doubt in my mind that is what really happened. But sometimes that when we ask questions of text, it's to try to figure out what an author's bias might be, looking at the author's perspective. Is this just one viewpoint on a topic? Are there multiple viewpoints on a topic? Should I believe everything in here? And if not, why not? And so we really, especially as you get older and you're out and about living your life and you don't have a teacher guiding you through either your reading in English class or your social studies reading or science reading, you have to ask really good questions of what you're looking at, viewing, hearing, reading to say, should I believe this or not? That's important. Questions about questioning. On your desk, you should have your copy of I Too by Langston Hughes, your annotations on it that you did for homework, and the questions that you wrote based on it. With a partner, with the person sitting next to you, this is not a table activity. This is a two-person activity. You are going to share your questions with each other that you wrote last night for homework. use the rubric to color code. What are the parts that are text specific in red? We color coded our rubric. We're going to color code our peers' questions. What are the parts that are text specific? In blue, what are the parts that show us that this is higher order? It's asking us to really analyze, dig deeper, go beyond the literal, the basic interpretations. And in pink, highlight the parts of the question that are open-ended, meaning that it can have more than one answer. After you do that, and you get your questions back, and you talk about the feedback that you give each other on the questions to make them as strong as they possibly can be, you're going to revise your questions, and I'm going to give you index cards. Your revised questions, the ones that you've cleaned up, made stronger, they're your absolute best questions that you could possibly ask at this point. You're going to put your name on the top of the index card, and you're going to list your questions. At the end of class, I'm going to collect these so that I can read the questions that you've written. But before we do that, when everybody at the table has his or her questions written, then you're going to use them to have a little mini Socratic seminar at your tables, to use the questions so that you all can lead the discussions about I-2 by Langston Hughes. Okay? Can somebody repeat what we're doing?
We're discussing the questions that we made with our partner, and then on index cards we're writing down our questions that we made on the card.
And then
Their
what are you doing
names.
with them?
Giving them to you, I thought.
Good. Before you
Yeah.
give them to me, what's happening with them?
We're figuring out what type of question they are.
Okay. Yes, you're doing
Right.
that at the beginning
Yeah.
as part of your feedback
Oh.
discussion. You're going to put your name on them. The revised ones go on the green card. But before you give them to me, you need to do what? Brittany?
Have a Socratic seminar with your group.
Exactly. And I will be coming around. I will be joining your Socratic seminars because I cannot wait to hear what it is that your group is going to get into based on your reading, understanding, and analysis of I-2. Okay? I'm going to let you go ahead and get started with the person sitting next to you. You're giving each other feedback on your questions. I will come around. If anybody does not have the homework, we'll figure out that situation. So I'll be there shortly. You can get started.
Not a Socratic seminar, it's just super magic.
So that's, obviously you're not gonna have that. What I'm gonna ask you to do for right now, ladies, I'm sorry to interrupt. If for right now, we can do a three-way kind of trade with the papers and give each other feedback in a triangle so that David has some time to actually catch up and read the poem. If you wanna read this, make some annotations. And then, even though you won't have discussion points necessarily written at the same time with classmates will, you can still participate in the conversation. If you've read the poem, kind of kept track of your thinking a little with some annotations, okay? And then we'll figure out getting the questions written in. Okay, does that make sense? Yep. All right, and I will give these to you now. This way you can go at your own pace. You're ready to move forward when you're ready.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yes, a blue pen? Yep, you got it. I will get that for you. And are you all set? Everybody has homework? Okay, so these are for you for when you're done, so you can go at your own pace. And Kristen, let me get you a blue pen. You're welcome.
Think about it. I mean, unless he's writing from a different perspective, which I don't believe he is. He was white, and he lived up north. So no slaves up north, and
All right, I'm going to give these
He's
to you for your revised
not-
questions when you're ready.
and even if he was black, he wouldn't be a slave. So kind of weird.
I think he was like portraying himself as somewhat different because like it seems like what he's talking about is like inequality toward like African Americans. It's kind of similar to yours. I said like in the text he says that it seems like he's saying he's an African American who's not treated right, and he feels like it's unfair because he's an American as well. What time period was this made, and what did they believe at the time?
Well, probably similar to the last poem because I think it has to do with the last poem because this is I Too Sing America. Do you think that it has a direct link to the other one? to the last poem?
I do, because the last poem, like we talked about yesterday, it talks about
She's messing with me. What is she doing? She's playing
how
with
like they're each their own person, and he's saying how he's different, and he's comparing this and he's also part of America.
What? I know you have lots of voice.
I mean, I'm saying how he's also part of America.
Oh, okay,
Like
yeah.
he, like these are all saying that he is. They're singular and
I'm going to
individual.
try not to do that in general because that's not a great practice. But when I see him, we see if I can do it as much as possible. Okay.
Maybe the reason they're saying he'll go to the kitchen, maybe he's like little kid and he might like, you know, get in the way or something, or they don't like his personality. Like maybe he's like dark there, like the personality, like almost. And then
He has broken English, and he's not going to school. That's how you would say I came American. Yeah.
because he's still eating in the house. If you think about it now, if he was a slave, they wouldn't make him eat in the kitchen because they don't even eat in the house, you know.
Another one of the questions I have is what will the difference be? Because in the text it says, tomorrow I will be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare tell me, dare say to me, be in the kitchen now. So what will be the difference?
Yeah.
And then on the side of my invitation, I put fighting for freedom, shelter that he is.
Yeah.
Besides like family and friends. They were saying it like
Well, it was really similar to she said that in the text that she said that she's going to sit at the company's table. I was wondering if this was showing like how like, the black population wanted to like make themselves like seen and make everybody to try and get rights. And I'm just saying what prompted him to feel like this. She did that.
questions that
Yes. I had another question. He's like, besides, then we'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. How is he beautiful? Like,
Well, I think it goes back to the last paragraph where he says the whole thing, like the whole thing, because he's saying that it'll be different tomorrow, that something will change. And I think that's, like, I think it's more his personality, because if he's being treated bad, then obviously people aren't really respecting him. So I think that when he says they'll see how beautiful I am, it'll be that they'll see that he's human too. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like he's a person too. The last question I had was why don't they see like that he is beautiful? Why don't they see like he's beautiful now? Because they'll say besides that like they'll see, meaning they will see how beautiful I am. Like why don't they see it now? Like what is he gonna do to change that?
When he says I too am America, down there, I'm thinking that he's saying that that sentence, like he's saying that he has the status as an American citizen, even if it is judged, you know, like. Like it's kind of, you know, more, you know, of an obvious, like almost like right there in the text, you know, it's like that he is American too.
Okay, so tomorrow I'll be at the table.
Do you have another question?
Tomorrow I'll be at the
Said
table.
when the author is describing his plan to sit with the company, why does he say that they won't tell him to leave? Like, why would they change?
I think it's like really the piece that's missing here is what will the difference be, because both of these reference like that something will change and that he'll be accepted. And I think it's like the real thing.
Yeah, and one more thing, is it from like his perspective? I mean, I'm pretty sure he's saying it is too, like because the last one was, and I think it's. And it said collecting from the poems of Langston Hughes. That's where it was collected from, so I'm pretty sure it is. But then why would he be saying this? I mean, it doesn't make literal sense. It must be like, you know, he must be referring to something else about himself.
And it doesn't have to be in his perspective.
He could write about like something he sees great.
Yeah.
The thing about it, he could be somewhere who people have slaves because not all of them was forged. There was like a border in between the South and North that people were, some were for slaves, some were not slaves. So I think that even though he could be part of it, he could have been somewhere where they had a slave or they
Well, if he was up north, nobody really, nowhere in the north had slaves that had been abolished. So
That was before like people started stopping slavery. Like
but we know that
almost
this
everyone
was
enslaved.
after the Civil War, I think, because, or at least during, because, so it had been abolished, because the last poem we know was written at the same time, and if this was written at the same time or after, because it seems like it's correlating.
we have is it was copyrighted.
So first, you think that the Darker Brother name is
Because it says by the estate of
and
the
the
state
seeing how beautiful I am is given to that person as a person.
Yeah, but we know that, like, he was,
Alright, we right there.
but if this has something to do with the last poem, which we're pretty sure it does,
Then
the last poem was written, I believe, during,
we're supposed to be analyzing the questions first, so I think that this is important.
yeah, so, but if the last one was written after,
About race.
or during, or like towards the end of the Revolution, or the Civil War, therefore, if this was made then, it was during or after, and he was clearly, you know, up north, so he would have been against it, so,
Just make sure that you put
That
those
doesn't mean you
questions
couldn't have
that you
gone
want
somewhere
to
people
the
wanted
end
to
of the discussion.
yeah,
In the next part of your okay?
maybe he's writing to criticize slavery.
Just to kind of help out a little bit. If you're
maybe it changes perspectives.
It doesn't necessarily have to be about slavery because like before Martin Luther King, that was like the 60s, and like black people were still mistreated even if they weren't slaves. So maybe he was talking about that or something.
I think that
Yeah, but then also, why would the slave be eating in their kitchen? Or the former slave be eating in their kitchen?
Because like
because they still weren't accepted in society. I think that it can change perspectives because, like, throughout the story, because,
I'm not really sure if it made sense.
like, not like actually change perspectives, but throughout the story he could be talking about slavery through the perspectives of the slave, but then down here he's saying how he sees that they are human too, like they are beautiful because they are, like they're people that have emotions.
But when he says, see how beautiful I am, and be ashamed.
Yeah, but I think he could also, if he's obviously not home, he would have to be slavery. So he would be saying how he's,
Maybe that's his song.
well, he could be saying how he sees other
Maybe that's the song
and
though.
that other people will see it too, and know that they're,
Yeah, but maybe that's the song he sings, like, to show that everyone's equal almost, like, that's his song, that everyone is. Maybe that's what he sings, like, he says, I too sing America, and then he says I again in the next sentence, maybe that's what he's singing.
Also, what you were saying before about like eating in the kitchen, maybe he's not like really talking about like one specific guy who had to eat in the kitchen. Maybe he's talking about like as a whole, like the whole population is like kind of hidden away from everybody.
Reprinted with the permission of
no, I don't.
So we're writing down our questions that we got?
The revised one?
Yeah.
What? All three.
Those are all very, very interesting questions, and I think your group, based on what I've seen in all your papers and these questions as well, I think you're going to have an excellent, very interesting conversation around this point. So if you just want to make sure that you have those listed, and I like the way you connected this to the big concept and the non-memorized is working. Yes. Wait, say that again? Can you Google it? Yes. You want to Google rights and use? You can look them up, absolutely.
It says copyright 1994, but then it says reprint.
Yes.
So we are confused.
I love the way you're using even the citations on the paper to make meaning. That makes me want to jump for joy. You're right. This was not written in 1994. This is just when it was published on the website. It was reprinted from earlier. I have an answer, but because we're using our technology to be self-sufficient, I'm going to let you do that. I'm proud of you for doing that. And your question about when this was originally published, why is it that that information came up?
Oh, I have another question we could add. Maybe what's the time period?
When there were slaves, and we were wondering if Langston would keep the time of
Back when if you were a slave, you were so who was darker of the family and supposed to be the king abused. Mine says
Or like, also I'm the darker brother that comes back to the last time we know. If he was in the Holocaust, someone's like hiding it, and like a shadow. So beautiful because he was kind of hid away.
Very, very interesting. You are all really thinking through some critical questions. I'd love to see the questions that you have on your cards, and I'm really excited to hear the conversation that you're having around it. So I think you're at the point where you can just quickly jot down your questions on the cards so that I can collect those and see those in about 7 minutes now. Oh my goodness. But I really would like, we'll continue this conversation block 4 when we meet again because you have some great ideas going on. And I think that you're right. I think that your inquiry to find out when Langston Hughes lived might shed some light on the historical perspective.
Another thing I added to my first sentence was that how does the reference I'm the dark brother impact the story? Because if you take that out, it just seems like he's being mistreated. Like he's just a normal person being mistreated. Because he says that like if you take it out, the sentence would be the SMU eat in the kitchen, and we don't really have a reason for that because if that the sentence says I am the darker brother, so then it like gives us a reason to think that he was sent to the kitchen for a reason.
Rachel, that is very, very interesting and insightful that you would identify a key line and talk about the impact not having that line would have on the poem. I'm very impressed with that question. And I think it's such an interesting one to discuss. I think that's fabulous. Rebecca. What race? He was black. Yep. As a matter of fact, if you want to...
We were told yesterday that originally.
No, that was these are two different
Langston Hughes I thought was white.
Walt Whitman is.
Oh. Walt Whitman is white and Elvis Roth. Okay.
If you would like to use technology to find out more about either the author or the time period, you absolutely can. After you have your questions ready, we're gonna, based on the time, we're gonna continue this conversation block 4 too.
Oh, then maybe he's a free slave.
Why would he be free? Yes, your own question. Because I'm going to collect this to see
Someone
how
took him
your
in.
questioning skill, I'm going to see your questioning skills to see where you are.
Maybe
as far
he has
as
magic.
Because this
Give me an example of a question you get.
Well, maybe he's magical.
So I want to try to figure out here.
Connecting to that, I think he was looking for people for families that we could have something. So I think that this is like what he has to do now until like society finally
All
accepts
the
him.
technical, mumbo jumbo about that and all that stuff. If we were to discuss
Even if he wasn't originally
what do you think is interesting about it?
still go to serving, be like servants because that's all they really do. So it's like a lot of times they just work for somebody.
Maybe he's
So
saying
you
like
can
one
really tell
day
if he's either a slave or a servant.
Maybe he
These are all.
had a magical power that made him sad
I knew you understood.
and write sad poems.
I will check in 1 second, please.
Maybe he had a superpower that made him sad and write sad
Why would
poems.
you have a superpower that makes you sad?
why would he have superpowers?
And because I don't know.
Find out what he does.
What is it about?
Even if superpowers
I don't know if
exist,
you were
why
asking
would
all that, but you need all that
I
information.
would have a superpower that makes him sad and writes sad
This is higher
poems.
order from the text.
Doesn't help anybody.
Hey, did any of them ask for their superpowers? Any of those superheroes?
No, but
Then they got them random
Still, they
superpowers.
wouldn't
They
do
could have
anything.
gotten any superpower. It could have been a bad
the Hulk
superpower.
should have dance. Okay.
Yeah, the Hulk could have gotten dead.
Hey, no,
Captain
couldn't.
America.
What?
Kinda, yeah.
There's an answer.
He's kind of forced into it.
Ariel, I'm on my way over. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we have 4 minutes, or actually 3 minutes. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you haven't already done so, please make sure that your discussion questions with your name on them are written on a green index card. I'm going to collect, you can leave them on your desks, I'll collect them at the end of the period, and when we come back again, period 4, we'll continue to use, some of you have started to discuss your questions, we'll continue that discussion to make meaning of I2 when we come back. But right now, you want to make sure that you write down your questions before we head to block 2. So.
Ah, maybe.
Maybe he's a brick wall.
I wonder what would have happened. I wonder what would have happened if like superheroes got like funky powers.
He probably did.
Sidekicks. I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he wants some dog fucking fucking suit.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah, we totally.
I like how I keep seeing America, and that says
Actually, if you think
it says they
much
said
besides
there, and it says tomorrow, and then they'll see more faces.
Isn't the Rock like another really even to the Batman movies, like the new ones that all ever. He hasn't even been in any of the new movies. He hasn't even been in the recent movies.
Yeah, Man of Steel first.
The one that just came out.
No, not the one that just came out. The one that came out.
No.
The first one.
The one that came out like last year. Yeah. With like General Zod and his Fortress of Solitude isn't like made out of ice. It's like a ship that they found underground. Yeah, that one. Okay, so.
And there's something interesting about that moment in our in between the energy stuff.
It's like half our people.
Oh yeah, what?
His face, all of a sudden, when he's like looking up, turns into the original Superman.
Please leave your questions on the table. I'll give you feedback and we'll discuss blocks 4. Enjoy blocks 2 and 3.